So welcome all of you to the conversation today on conflict coaching. Very, very excited to do this as a live conversation, make it very interactive. So yeah, I've got some information for you and jump in, ask your questions, share your thoughts. I'm guessing there's some expertise here that can add value to it. And the questions, of course, add value to it. So what I've got set up is to talk about how to handle conflict. So we'll dig into reasons behind conflict, what happens in terms of reactions, the results when there's conflict, a few things worth knowing about conflict. We're going to have a breakout discussion, skills for managing conflict, conflict coaching. We'll walk through the STOP model again, what ifs, dealing with some of those unexpected things that come up, another breakout discussion, a quick summary of the reasons conflict coaching works, and then, of course, provide resources. So as far as how to handle conflict, here's the big picture overview for you. Understanding what's behind it. A lot of times we come into whatever the conflict is, and we start with this premise of somebody else is wrong, or they don't know what they're talking about, or they're being stubborn, or whatever it is, without really considering what their motivators are or what's driving it for them. We definitely want to recognize the differences in personal styles, personalities, how people approach that conflict. Of course, use the assertiveness skills that we develop as coaches, the listening skills that we develop as coaches, having the process for actually working through the conflict. And let me take a moment there. For those of you that remember the STOP process, unsure if you know where that came from, I used to train people to be mediators. And so it was a court-approved program. And then the mediators learned how to do that. And we found the process over time, over years, it's the process that really works. So how's this sounding for all of you? Good? Going to get you there?
Good. Sounds good.
All right. Awesome. So getting started with it. In terms of reasons behind conflict, and let me pause for just a moment. Natalie, we are recording. We're going to put it on YouTube. So if you're okay with that, come on in live for the live conversation. And if not, stay hidden in the background, just letting you know that's happening. So the reasons behind conflict. First off, it's a simple misunderstanding. People heard something differently, didn't have all the information, and it's really a very simple thing. It's a matter of getting the clarity. On a different perspective from that is a misperception. I thought they meant or said this, and this is what they really meant or said. Fear is a big one. And perhaps you've heard what the word fear stands for. If you make it in acronyms, anybody know that one?
Fear, what is it? False evidence appearing real. False evidence appearing real.
Yeah, I've heard evidence. I've also heard expectations. So yeah, absolutely. And sometimes in terms of conflict, the fear is of impact or results of whatever the conflict's over. Confusion can be behind the conflict, difference of opinion. And there's, of course, lots of that. And it doesn't necessarily mean one person's right or wrong. It simply means they have a difference in what their opinion is. If somebody's disengaged and they're simply pulling back and the other person is frustrated because they feel like, okay, that person's got to be more involved with this. And conflict comes up that way as well. What thoughts or questions come up for you with this list?
Sometimes getting to the reasons behind the conflict, you just got to really tease that out. So to
Yeah.
find out which one of these it is, you've got to really probe sometimes.
Yeah, you got to have the conversation and really take the time to listen. Yeah. Huge, huge. So
I
good.
apologize, I'm late. But I was curious, would you differentiate opinions versus values, or where might that fall on this list?
I think that's a good point. You're absolutely right, Katie, because sometimes the value somebody has behind something is part of it. Yeah. And I would actually call that something different.
Thank you.
Especially in today's world with everything going on. So, yeah. And Jenny and Katie, by the way, yes, we are recording. The intention is to make this available on the YouTube channel. And it's also to have it be very much a live interactive conversation. So definitely want to invite you to join in as long as you're comfortable with that. All right, we got the thumbs up from both of you. So let's talk about what happens when there's conflict. So some people will just give in automatically, or they will withdraw. They don't like conflict. They hate conflict. They avoid conflict, whatever it is. And so okay, I'm done. And they're out of here. Other people become the salesperson. They want to sell their idea and get everybody else to buy into it and agree with them. Some people have the answer. They're the ones that just know it. I know what the answer is. And some people want to do some research and analysis before they weigh in on something and take time to think about it. So what do you do with this? To me, what's interesting here is there are all ways of avoiding conflict. Even the person that has the answer or the one that's promoting or selling their own idea, they're avoiding the conflict because it's all about their idea. And then the ones that withdraw, whether they give in or they're going to go research, they're avoiding the conflict. What happens when we avoid conflict?
Nothing gets solved.
Nothing gets solved, and
It gets bigger. I was gonna say it gets worse. Yeah.
Better.
it gets bigger. Boom, blows up. And the longer it goes unresolved, chances are the bigger it's going to get. So, yeah, awesome. And let's see, we've got Kim is joined in. Kim, we are recording. I'm going to put the recording on YouTube. So if you want to join live, we hope you do. Come on in. And if you don't want to, that's okay too. We understand that. So just want to let you know what the game plan is. All right. So a couple of statistics to share with all of you. And I think these are absolutely fascinating. So in terms of conflict, 60 to 80% of the difficulties within companies or organizations are based on the strained relationships or the conflict between employees. And it's not about anything else. It's not that somebody's not motivated, that kind of thing. It's really the strain of what's happening that is getting people. What's your reaction when you hear that statistic?
Oh yeah, I believe it.
I mean, definitely a wow, but yeah, very much so.
Yeah, you've seen it.
I've lived it.
There you go. Awesome. All right. So then this one too. 25 to 40% of a manager's time being spent on conflict. Is that fit right in there with you? That's a lived experience, something you're very aware of?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, that's huge. That's a big chunk of their time. And who's got that kind of time, right? Senior executives spend 20% of their time in litigation. That's
Wow.
pretty scary.
Mm-hmm.
And that's expensive time.
Mm-hmm.
So back to what you said earlier, when conflict is avoided, it increases. It can be discussed in a way that respects everyone. One of the quotes I like to use comes from Helga Rhodes, and she said, conflict is a fact of life. It does not have to be a way of life. It's a matter of recognizing it as actually a good thing. Conflict can be really positive when it's dealt with appropriately. And the reason I say that is out of conflict comes the exchange of ideas and more information. And that opens up possibilities in a way that isn't going to happen if we don't have the conflict. So seeing it as an opportunity. And I think this is big for the people involved in a conflict until each one of them feels they think they've been heard and understood. So it's not, oh, I heard you, I understand you. It's until they feel, they know that they've been heard and understood, that they're ready to really move forward. Otherwise, they stay stuck in that conflict. Another one worth knowing. Ownership. So think about our whole approach with coaching. When they're involved in deciding the solution, figuring out what it's going to be, the plan, then you have the follow through. Unsure if you heard or remember the statistic. When people go to court in the United States, better than 60% of their time on the way out the door of the courtroom, you're saying, I don't care what the judge said, I'm doing it my way. When you go through the conflict process that we're going to talk about, better than 90% of the time people resolve the conflict and they follow through with it. I like those odds a lot better. What do you think?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yes.
definitely. Definitely. Okay. So I can do this one of two ways. I can keep everybody in one room together, or I can throw you into smaller rooms because we've got enough. You'd be in groups of 4 if we did that. So let me know your preference if you want to stay all 8 here or go into the smaller groups. And what I'm going to ask you to do is discuss these 2 questions. The reasons, how do the reasons matter? And how do the different personalities influence the way we handle it? So give me a vote. Do you want everyone together in one discussion with 8 people, or do you want to do 2 smaller groups of 4?
I'm fine with all of us together.
I'm good with that too.
Agree.
Okay.
That works.
All right. So I'm going to put all of you in charge of this one. So I'm going to invite you to decide who wants to be the spokesperson and lead the conversation and share the thoughts and ideas.
Sure, I will lead. Let's see here. So, the first question, how do the reasons for the conflict matter? Anyone want to shed some light on that or give some reasons why they think it matters?
This is Katie. I think it matters, going back to that previous point of if people feel like it's been resolved or addressed, then they're able to move forward. So they've got to think through what the reasons are and what it would take.
I think when it comes to the reasons for the conflict, those matter, because if you don't resolve the reason for conflict, it will come back. So even if it's fixed in the moment, if it's one of those things that's a recurring reason for conflict, then they're not really addressing the reason. So the reason is important because you want to make sure that this is not going to happen again.
I like that. And
I think it could
Kim,
also,
I see.
oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was
Sorry.
just going to point out, I see that Kim has a note in the chat to understand motivations and the possible solutions. So thank you for that, Kim. Kelly?
Yeah, and I think that to find the solution, you've got to understand what to solve for. What is the conflict? So, and
Exactly.
people may be coming at it from a different point of conflict, different reason. So that could impact the outcome.
Yes, I totally agree with that. Anyone else? All right, let's move on to the second question then. How do different personalities influence conflict management?
Mm.
Well, I'll speak from my my knowledge base. So I'm very familiar with the DISC personality. So when it comes to personality types, the D is all about how do we fix the problem now? How do we get the solution right now? And set up a process so that we don't encounter this ever again. And people and their emotions are last on their list. So any of the I's and the S's in the room feel steamrolled. And they care about people's experience and how is everyone handling the conflict emotionally, especially the S's, they're concerned with that. And they certainly don't want to rock the boat in that fact. And the C just wants to go research everything to find the perfect answer. They want more data for the process, or at least that's my interpretation.
Right. What else? I have a note here from Natalie. Different personalities might influence the style of resolution and the amount of time it takes to arrive there. Any more you want to say about that, Natalie?
I definitely agree with Natalie. But if we're going to jump in, so if you are, cut me off. But yeah, just
you're
really
good.
that what style do you come in with? What's your approach to that conflict management, and what feels more comfortable? And so, do you have to navigate through that if people have different styles?
Exactly.
Well, it's not only personality styles, it's communication styles as well. That can be a situation where people don't feel heard or understood.
I also see Kim has another thought here. High emotional intelligence assists with recognizing where people are and how they are coming into the conversation and how to manage the conversation. What else?
If I can add, if you think back to the communication piece in the coach training, 70% of the population are primarily passive, 30% are primarily aggressive. So a passive person is more likely to withdraw or want time to think about it or just give up. And then a more aggressive person is the one that's, as you were saying, Jenny, doing the bulldozing, if you will. Yeah.
Wow. Those stats matter. It does matter. So thank you for bringing that to light. Anyone else wanted to say more about different personalities influencing conflict management?
This just impacts the solution. Kind of like what you said, Kathy, if someone's passive, they just might be like, okay, whatever, just to agree to something versus, someone who's passionate is just going to continue to fight for their point.
All right.
I think,
So
can we
go ahead, Lisa?
Can we go back to the reasons? I'm just thinking about that. Sometimes the reasons may appear to be something, but that's not the reason. Like if somebody is having a conflict over a decision that another colleague or someone made, maybe they're seeing that reason for the conflict of they're being attacked for who they are personally, not just the surface decision that is being made for whatever reason. They can look more into it than what's intended.
Exactly. I agree with that because I have encountered situations where the issue was not about the problem at hand. It really stemmed from past experiences and past emotional, hurts and dealings, as opposed to what was on the table in front of me at that time. So I definitely agree with that, Lisa. Thank you.
Mhm.
Which feeds into when you talked about it coming back in the future. So if you think about the personalities, and maybe that's the underlying issue that we're not talking about. And then during the conflict, the aggressive ones are again pushing and advocating for what they want. And the passive ones are further, if you will, further shut down or injured. And you're literally adding to the conflict. Because while on the face, we think we have a solution, no, we've just added to the problem.
Right.
Yes. Kim says being present and watching for those things helps to equip us with strategies of engagement.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Kim. And Kathy, I'm not sure how much time we had allotted for this breakout, so I'm just checking in with you to see if we want to keep going or.
I'm playing it by ear because I got one more to talk about, or one more breakout set up for this. So all of you tell me, do you feel complete on this conversation?
Mhm.
We're good here?
Yes.
All right, excellent. So quick question for all of you. What are the insights you gained from that discussion?
So definitely understanding the root cause will help us to develop the right solution. Thinking about the person's style, their approach, not just their style and approach, but also their communication style, understanding those personality tests like the DISC, fixing the problem and setting up a process to improve and avoid it in the future. And also understanding the impact that it has on the solutions that you create, understanding that root cause, understanding where it comes from, really impacts the solutions you co-create. And I welcome anybody else to chime in on anything I left out there.
That's good.
Yeah, there's another note in the chat box. Interpersonal skills are important. Listening, validating. Oh. Which also speaks to the emotional intelligence that was discussed. Good, good. All right. So specific skills for managing conflict. The clear, direct language. It's so easy for people to think about how they're going to explain something and then second guess themselves and, okay, I'm not sure I said it the way I want, so let me say it again, or let me explain what I said, or, and they get into having so much information or having such confusing information, it really isn't clear what they mean and it gets lost. So the clear, direct language that you all worked on in coach training of being short and simple, to the point, if you will, in a way that still respects everybody. The fewer words, the easier for others to understand those words. So everybody feeling the impact that can have?
Mm-hmm.
Another one is the questions you ask. Your coaching questions are absolutely an incredible tool when you're dealing with conflict, because when your questions are short and simple, people understand them. They don't get in the way of anyone's thinking. And when they're open-ended, it really is the other people figuring out the answer. That's very different than if I ask a question that's leading and I'm leading them in a particular direction. And then, of course, you're flexing to the different styles, the different personalities. And we've talked about this in the coach training as well. Is that person emotion or logic? An emotion person really does want to talk about their feelings. And until they feel understood in terms of their feelings, they're not ready to move forward and they can stay stuck. And somebody who's logic doesn't like talking about feelings. They really want to dig into the facts and the plan and the process. And we already talked about passive and aggressive. So you've got all these different styles at play. And depending on how many people are involved in the conflict, you can have all of them in the room. If it's involving a number of people or a group. Alternatively, if it's one or two people that are in conflict, it can really jump out at you. And an interesting one too is if they're the same style, that in and of itself can add to the conflict. For example, two logic aggressive people are both going to feel like I'm right. And if they have different ideas about what right is, that just adds to the conflict. I'm seeing the nod. So you've seen that one happen too. Yeah. Yeah. So the listening that we do, back to if people are heard and understood, then and only then are they ready to move forward in addressing the conflict. So we've really got to take the time to listen and to listen to each person in turn so that they themselves on an individual basis feel heard and understood. And we demonstrate that both by listening with intention to understand and then rephrasing or summarizing what they said. Because if I just say, okay, I understand, did they believe me? No, not at all. Rephrasing it, saying, so what you're saying is, and giving it back to them in that succinct summary, using some of their key words. Okay, now they know. I've demonstrated to them that they've been heard and understood. And then our stop process. So I'm going to review it. If you have questions, tell me. I'm unsure how much any of you remember this. So tell me if I'm giving you too much or too little. So the idea with stop is that each letter in the word stands for something. The first letter is S, stories. What that means is that everybody gets a chance to tell their story. They've got to be heard and understood. Now, of course, this brings up a challenge in and of itself. For example, Shakrisa, if you and I are arguing and we're going to start with stories, who gets to tell their story first?
Whoever's the loudest, really.
Yeah. Whoever yells the loudest, the longest, right? Okay. So here's the next question. Shakrisa, if I manage to yell louder and longer than you do, are you really going to listen to me tell my story? No way. Yeah. I'm seeing everybody shake their heads. So Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, says seek first to understand. So let's do an alternative. If Shakrisa says to me, okay, go ahead and tell your story. And she actually does listen to me and she rephrases what I say. Wow, she heard me, she understood me. And then if she says to me, now may I share my perspective, am I more likely to actually listen to her?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, because you listened to me. That's huge if it's 2 people. If you're doing conflict coaching and you have 2 people in the room and they're the ones in conflict, your challenge remains. Who gets to go first? And is the other person really hearing it and understanding it? So in a scenario like that, you ask them who wants to go first. And if they can't decide, the challenge is this: if you pick who gets to go first, you just took sides. So do something neutral, flip a coin. Whatever neutral way, you decide who goes first. Now, when the first person is talking, it's unlikely the other person is listening to them. When you rephrase what the first person said, the other person can hear you. And so you rephrase it, you summarize it back. Then when that step is complete, it's the other person's turn to go. Now, here's what generally happens. They get really busy responding to what the first person said. And we're in the argument already, and they haven't been heard and understood. So the way we handle that is after the first person talks, we turn to the second person and we say to them, pretend like I haven't heard anything. I have no idea what's going on. In your own words, tell me your perspective. Does everybody see the difference here? Your words, your perspective, as if I knew nothing. That way, they really do tell you their story. And you do the same thing. You rephrase back to them, because then the person who spoke before can hear you rephrase it. Both people will feel like they've been heard and understood. Then and only then are we ready to move on to the next step. And the next step in the process is to make a list of topics. And this has got to be done together. Very specifically, if one person has their list here and the other person has their list here, are you noticing they're still separate? When we make one list, literally physically one list, one piece of paper, however you set that up, it's one list together. That's the first step in bringing them together. It's got to be our list. Whatever topic either one of them thinks goes on that list, goes on that list. And once you have the list of topics, the next thing you're going to do is figure out which order you're going to move through them. Sometimes it's pretty obvious. Well, we have to settle this in order for anything else because it's all dependent. Other times it's, okay, where can we get a quick win on settling something? So it does vary. And alternatively, it may be just taking turns choosing which ones they want to talk about. And again, a neutral process for that. When you know what you're going to talk about, what order, the next step is to move into options. When it comes to options, each person must give multiple options. Because if I only give one option, in my brain, that's all there is. There's only one possibility. And I'm done. I'm not open to anything else. So back to if Shakrisa and I are arguing, Shakrisa is going to be the intelligent person in the room and I'll be the obnoxious one. In terms of options, if I say, oh, I don't know. You've all heard that one, right? I don't know. And you may remember the response to this. Shakrisa will say, okay. And if you did know, what's an answer? What's an option? So she'll accept my I don't know and then ask for if I did know. Then, pretending I'm the really obnoxious person, I say, no, I don't know. So then the next piece to happen there is to go into, okay, so Kathy, if you were your friend or your colleague or your boss or your employee or whatever, asking for options, what do you think they might say? And so you get me coming at it from somebody else's perspective. What might somebody else advise in that regard? And it gets me out of my own head. So that's another way to do it. And then a different alternative is if you do what we call a reverse brainstorm. And some of you may remember that. A reverse brainstorm is literally saying, okay, no good ideas, just the stupidest, dumbest, craziest idea you can come up with. Because people can come up with stupid, dumb, crazy ideas. And it gets us talking. It gets us throwing ideas out. It opens up the thinking. Sometimes the stupid, dumb, crazy idea is actually a really good one. And then you say, okay, no good ones yet. Just give me mediocre ones. And then you move to good ones. Excuse me. So you're backing into coming up with the options. Multiple approaches here. I'm guessing you've used some of them when you've had conversations or done coaching with people. Are they sounding familiar to you? Some of the concepts? Okay, good, good. All right. So whatever the options are, I come up with multiple options. Shakrisa comes up with multiple options. We can go back and forth on this process. We both have to have multiple options. And now we've got this list of options. We got to figure out which one we're going to use. How do we do that? Well, sometimes it's obvious. This is the only one we're both going to deal with and accept. Sometimes we have to back into it. We start eliminating options and back into the one that's going to work. Sometimes it becomes a hybrid of the different options that were thrown out. So we talk those through until we choose which option we're going to go with. And then we're ready to create the plan. The plan is who's going to do what, when are they going to do it, how are they going to do it to put this option into effect, to make it happen. Now, if Shakrisa and I are both here and we're the ones in conflict, we can literally create that plan. Sometimes in your conflict coaching, you're going to be having the conversation just with one person and they're dealing with a conflict for someone else. So how do you move through these steps when you only have one person? Well, you ask them to tell their story and then you say to them, okay, pretend like I know nothing and pretend like you're the other person. What's the story from their perspective? And you get them thinking about the other person's story. And then when it comes to the topics, okay, what do you believe has to be addressed? And if the other person were here, what did they want to add to the list? And then we go to options. What are the options for dealing with this? And then if the other person were here, what options are they going to want to put on the table? The plan part, if we only have one of the people here involved in the conflict, the plan often becomes how they'll move forward in terms of having the conversation with the other person. And that you've just modeled it in the conversation you have with them helps them create that plan and set it up. If you have a group of people, it's same process, taking turns. Now, occasionally, you have a really big group of people and it's too many people to actually hear from everyone. That's more sometimes if you're like a union dispute or something like that. In a case like that, what you do is have that big group break out into smaller groups based on their position or whatever it is they're looking for or want. And then you have a spokesperson from each group explain their side of the story and progress through the steps that way. So it works whether it's two people involved in conflict themselves working through it, whether you as a coach are supporting two or more people walking through it. Questions or comments on your process?
How do you set this up with the individuals that you're coaching? How do you kind of, get them to understand this model or the process?
Well, so you can do it a couple of ways, Kelly. So one possibility in terms of setting it up with them is simply saying, hey, there's an opportunity here to sit down and go through some conflict coaching, and I can provide a very specific process for that. Alternatively, you can actually explain the process to them and say, here's how we're going to have this conversation. We're going to start out with each of you having the opportunity to share your story, your perspective. Then we'll move to making a list of topics. Then we'll explore options, and then you'll work on creating your plan. And you can tell them it's totally okay to be transparent with
I was
them.
gonna say, yeah, okay, thanks.
Oh, nice. Other thoughts or questions?
Okay, I've got a question.
Mm-hmm.
What if you're working with one individual who, you know, is experiencing conflict, but their other party, it's not that they're avoiding, so they are engaging conflict, but by avoiding.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any advice for how to help the person think through what they can do and control if the other person's not going to engage?
Well, literally, it's going through this process with them. So you start by saying, okay, tell me your side of the story. And then you say to them, okay, now if the other person were here and explaining their side of the story, what's that person's perspective? What are the topics that have to be addressed? What are the options? What options does that person want to have? And after they've gone through that, what you've done is help them understand the other person and create an awareness of where that other person is coming from. So then when it comes to creating the plan, they can think about it. Okay, the other person is avoiding me. What are my options for connecting with them or getting through? And it may be they involve somebody else in the workplace or another person they both know and are okay with. It may be they invite them into a conflict coaching session with you doing the conflict coaching, or a different coach because you know one of them or work with one of them. And it may be simply that they say to the other person, you know, I've been reflecting on this and I'm guessing what's important to you is this. Is that accurate? And literally sharing what they think is important to the other person and inviting their input then as a way to engage them. And yeah, they're going to come up with their plan. They'll know, okay, I can go talk to them. I can write an email. I can involve somebody else. They'll know what's going to work in their situation. Does that help, Katie?
It does. Yeah, thank you.
Excellent. Excellent. Go ahead, Lisa.
So after each person tells their story and you restate it for the purposes of allowing the person to understand they've been heard, and so the other person understands it as well. Do you mitigate a conversation around any misunderstanding? Or, you know, if one person says, well, I didn't intend for you to say that, or I didn't mean it that way. I mean, do you allow for engagement of the accuracy of what was intended, or does that come under a topic of clarification around what was intended? I don't know. I'm just.
Yeah, I think, Lisa, you're going to go with your gut on that. And it may be, you know, we're not specifically in this piece or this piece, we're kind of in between them, and that's okay too.
Okay.
So the main thing, and here's my little caveat to it. The main thing is each person being heard and understood means it's not about interrupting them while they're being heard and understood. It's not about arguing with them while they're being heard and understood. So if the person says, well, you know, you said this and you hurt my feelings and da, 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 I don't want to let that other person interrupt. I want to say, okay, it sounds like you want to add to this. Give me a minute. Let me finish here. Then we're going to find that out.
Mm-hmm.
So that I truly hold the space for the first person. Then when they're done and I've rephrased to them, I can say, so it sounds like you wanted to add some information or a different perspective on that. What do you want to add?
Got it.
Yeah.
Because obviously the story is going to bring up a response from the other person. They want to clarify or what have you.
Exactly. Exactly. And they truly do. Yeah. Good. This is my boss checking on me, everybody. Gotta love it, right? So too funny. All right. So are we good with the process here?
Are you getting along okay with your boss? Do you need any intervention? Or-
Yeah, right. Definitely need some conflict coaching here. She believes that I should be, you know, taking care of her 24/7 and just doesn't
little needy.
understand that sometimes I have to step away. Too funny. Too funny. Okay, so let's talk some what ifs. What if the emotions run really high? How do you deal with that? What do you do?
Mm-mm-mm.
Thoughts, comments?
I mean, I would think you would want to bring it back to the issue at hand, like the conflict, the situation that you're struggling with, that the two people or groups are struggling with. But it seems insincere to not recognize an emotion, so maybe ask where that emotion's coming from and ask them to talk a little bit about it, but then they may be embarrassed to be doing it in front of other people. I have no idea.
Good exploration, though. Go ahead, Jenny.
Well, I think it also depends on how people process their emotions, because some people might need to take a step back and do the withdrawal for a moment, because if they're in the middle of their feels, if they're in the middle of their anger, their disappointment, their sadness, their feelings of betrayal, whatever it may be, they may not be able to deal with that process in a way that's going to be effective, and they may need to step back. I would think, and so I think giving all parties involved the option to say, hey, okay, sounds like we're in the middle of something here. Do you need to take a moment to, step back, calm down, center yourself, because other people, they may want to deal with it right then. And if you're trying to push someone who needs to withdraw, it's going to cause more conflict because they're not ready and they're not in a space where they can handle it.
Yeah. So let me play with that a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
If I've got these people here and I'm noticing one person is just way too much emotion going on, if I ask them if they need to withdraw, I can be putting them on the spot in front of the other person. So I can make the call. I can say, okay, what we're going to do is take a few moments. I'm going to give each of you a different space to sit in, and I'm going to come and talk to each of you individually. And I can do that with intention. It's a very common tool in mediation where you put people in a separate room and you go between the rooms basically and talk to them. And then when they're ready, bring them back together. So that's one possibility. Alternatively, back to one of the things you were exploring, Lisa, is number one, I've got to make sure that that emotion has been acknowledged and accepted. So we talked about rephrasing, summarizing what they said. When you did your coach training, you also talked about what we call reflective listening, reflecting the emotions behind the words. And so simply saying, seems like that's very upsetting for you, or seems like that's a challenge for you, or it seems like you're angry about that or excited about that or whatever it is, and acknowledge that emotion. And then once it's been acknowledged, then we can move forward talking about, okay, and how do you want to move forward? How do you want to address that? So possibility of separating, talking to them that way, and the possibility sometimes of simply hearing it, acknowledging it, and then we're okay to move forward on it. Trust your gut is what I'm going to say. It's probably right. Are we good with that one? All right, awesome. Anger. This is an interesting one. What if somebody gets really angry and they're mad? So if it's one person alone, here's something that's interesting. Have you all heard the paradox of anger? The paradox of anger is that the more you allow others to vent their anger, the more it dissipates. Alternatively, the more you yourself vent anger, the more it escalates. It's a matter of how much venting is going on, right? So enough to blow it off without it being so much that we're just churning with it. If somebody is really angry, there's a couple of possibilities for you in the conversation. So one possibility is to literally set a time period. Sounds like there's some things you really just want to get out. So here's what we'll do. We'll set a timer for 2 minutes, and you can just vent and say whatever you want, and I'll just be okay with it. And then we'll talk about it afterwards. And what's really fascinating about that is very few people can actually vent nonstop for 2 minutes. It doesn't sound like much time, but when somebody's actually sitting there listening to them, it's a lot of time for somebody to keep going with the anger. So that can be huge just in letting them get it out. A different option is to take a break. Now, the caveat to it is this: anger can actually be an avoidance mechanism. It can be, oh, if I get angry enough, everybody else will be uncomfortable, and then the conversation will end and we won't have to discuss this. So I'm just going to get really angry when this comes up. So a way to handle it then is to say, okay, I need a break. I'm not pointing anyone else out, by the way. I'm only going to do it here. I'm going to say, I got to take a break, whether it's, bio break, food break, whatever, doesn't matter. I got to take a break. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take 20 minutes. And in 20 minutes, we're going to come back and continue the conversation. 20 minutes is enough for people to move through, and it's not so much that they're off the hook. They know we're coming back, and they know when we're coming back. Good with that one? Okay, awesome. Tears. What if somebody starts crying? You know what? It's okay. What's that song? It's my party. I can cry if I want to. Right? You're with me on that one. It's totally okay. Did you know that? It is totally okay. Maybe I just hand them a tissue and we keep having the conversation. If they want a few minutes, we can use what we talked about with the anger. Yeah, okay, I'm going to take a break for 10 minutes. I got to run to the restroom or whatever. Send everybody in a different direction. We take a break and then we come back. Very much like anger can be a way of avoiding the conflict, tears can be too. If somebody knows every time I cry, I'm off the hook, they can get really good at crying. So it cannot be a game stopper, if you will. So it's either hand them a tissue and keep going, or it's let's have a finite, defined period of time to take a break. Silence. Have you ever experienced where you ask somebody a question and they just don't answer? It's a really good avoidance game. Does everybody remember the staring game when you were kids where you stared at each other and whoever blinks first loses the game? Did you know this is the same game? It's a variation. It's a variation of the game. So when you ask a question, just go silent. And it's up to them to respond. Now, the first time you do this, especially if it's one of those really tough employee conversations, like if you're in HR and you're asking somebody how they're going to handle it or whatever, and they just sit there silently, it's an avoidance mechanism, yes. So you wait for a little while and you go, okay, now I'm going nuts. The silence is going on too long, right? Does anybody feel like that? So here's what I can do. I can say to that person, it's clear you're using this time to think, and I don't want to interrupt that. So what I'm going to do is work on something over here while I'm waiting for you to think. And you see the very clear message here. No, you're not off the hook. Yes, I'm going to do something. You're the one who's going to sit there uncomfortable until you come up with your answer. Okay. Now, of course, I got to be careful with that. If I have both people here at the same time, can I hold the space for them? Yeah, absolutely. And what I can be doing is thinking in my head, okay, This is theirs. I wonder how long it's going to take them. And I can start singing songs to myself or whatever else it takes so that I hold the silence for them. Good. I see your note, Katie. You like that one. Okay, I'm just gonna work on this while you're thinking. So nice. I will say if you jump into that silence, you're rescuing them and they know how to avoid having to come up with the solution. No, good. Denial. How do you deal with that one? Well, I didn't do anything wrong, right? It's not my fault. It's their problem. I don't have an issue with it. It's all kinds of ways that denial can come out. So what I'm going to do is acknowledge where they're coming from. And I'm going to say, given that there are different perspectives as well, how do you want to handle that? What's the impact on you if somebody else perceives it differently and it doesn't get resolved? And you can actually challenge them to consider that. Blame, pointing the fingers, the shame, blame game, it's somebody else's fault. It's our job to neutralize that. So I'm hearing that for you, the word choice is a factor. They're saying that this person said whatever, and I'm not going to repeat that. So I can neutralize it by saying the word choice was a factor. How do you want to move forward in the conversation? And give it back to them. Because much like coaching, dealing with conflict is about keeping them in charge of figuring it out. And I'm realizing time is an issue. So let me go here. Impasse. What's impact? I mean, literally both sides are just dug in. I'm going to simply ask them, what happens if you don't come up with a solution? What happens if you do? So right now you're at an impasse. How long do you want to stay there? And give it to them. All right. So I'm curious, in this conversation, what did you learn about managing conflict?
I love the stop model. I must have slept through that during my coaching class because I love that.
Nice. Mhm.
I agree with what Kim just said. I think the thoughts on how to work with folks who might be using silence or denial, that's been really powerful because I'm used to the more, I'll say, aggressive side, but this has been very helpful. No more passive.
Nice.
I like
Yes,
the subtleness of even asking even deciding who goes first to tell their story can be picking a side. And would not have occurred to me, but you're right. That was very insightful.
Yeah. Good. All right, I'd love to hang out for more insights. I'm also recognizing time. So a couple of closing thoughts for all of you. Conflict coaching works because each person gets a chance to be heard and understood. That's the only time they're ready to deal with that conflict. It also works because they are the ones who are part of the solution. Much like telling the answer doesn't work, they're not going to use it. When they figure out their own answer, they're going to use it. So quick peek at resources. You, of course, have the International Coaching Federation, the Coach Cert with information there. The Center for Coaching Solutions, where we provide coaches. We do coaching inside organizations, providing those coaches and coaching program support. And then, of course, you've got all of the content that's available to you. And I'll just leave it there. Do check out the coaching blog, the books that come out each year. There's some great stuff in there. And then, of course, make sure you're getting that newsletter to know future webinars. And if you ever want to give one of them, let me know. Happy to host any one of you. I'm available for a quick call or email check-in if you have a question on something, want more information. We're also here in terms of support for outsourcing, coaching programs, training, and then individual, group, and team coaching. Now, what's next for you? If you want to explore any of those services, let me know. And then for you on a personal level, be thinking about your own action plan. As we know, if you go to a training, you don't get intentional about how you're using the information, it just gets lost. So are you going to complete coaching training? Are you going to review the training that you did do? How are you intentionally applying the skills? Have you thought about having a coach yourself or doing a trade with other colleagues? And then support through a coaching program. I'm happy to hang around here afterwards. If anyone has additional questions, happy to do that. At the same time, I want to say thank you to all of you for being here, for engaging in this conversation. Definitely a lot more fun than just having the talking head here. So thank you for that. Do let me know what else we can do to be helpful. So thank you, everyone. And hang out if you have questions, let me know. Yeah, thank you. I'm seeing the comment in the chat box.
Thank you so much.
Thank
This
you.
is great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.